Domingo Benavides is an official story witness to the shooting on 10th Street, and his story has problems. One of those problems is that the first day descriptions of the suspect fit Benavides better than they fit Oswald, and that's because of the hair, the black hair. Oswald doesn't have black hair, but Domingo Benavides does, and sometimes it's described as bushy. I think, to judge by this CBS appearance of Benavides, that you could say his hair is bushy, and it's also described as wavy in another description, and I think you could describe it that way too. And he's thin, and I don't know how tall he is, but he's probably about the right height too, to judge by how he appears in the CBS program. So he fits the description better than Oswald, even though witnesses did identify Oswald in the police lineup. I think we have a problem of some dishonest witnesses here, but the initial descriptions fit Benavides better than Oswald. And it's weird, considering that he was the closest witness to the shooting, that we have nothing on the record from him before his Warren Commission testimony. This, of course, comes from after that, when he's talking to Eddie Barker, and he describes a little bit here what happened.
The policeman got out of the car, and as he walked past the windshield of the car where they'd kind of lined up over the hood of the car, well, this other man shot him.
So clearly, Benavides says that he was there, he was witnessing the scene, and he saw this other man shoot the police officer. But the only thing we have on the record from the day it happened comes from Detective Lavelle, who was famously photographed with Lee Harvey Oswald, a report he filed on November 22nd, in which it says, another witness who saw the officer lying in the street but did not see the suspect was a Domingo Benavides. He was at the scene and picked up 2 spent .38 hulls and turned over to Officer J.M. Poe, who in turn gave them to crime lab investigator Pete Barnes. So according to Lavelle, Benavides told him that he did not see the suspect, even though he told the Warren Commission and CBS that he did see the suspect. So at the very least, Benavides seems to have an honesty issue. He was either lying to Lavelle or he was lying later. But apparently he was telling the truth about giving the hulls to Poe from the Dear Chief letter, a Poe report, a Poe and Jez report. It says an unidentified witness gave Officer J.M. Poe 2 empty hulls and an empty cigarette pack and stated these were the bullets that killed the officer, and that the suspect reloaded the gun as he ran across the church lawn. These 2 hulls were released to Sergeant Pete Barnes. So this says the same thing as in the Lavelle report, except that it adds the detail that these shells came from the church lawn, which is not the official story. Now, the church in question is the Abundant Life Temple, which is about a block away, just a little more than a block away, from the scene of the shooting on 10th Street. This church is first mentioned in the radio traffic in the 1:33 minute by Patrolman McDonald when he says, send a squad over here to 10th and Crawford to check out this church basement. That's where the church is, at 10th and Crawford. So for some reason, at 1:33, the cops are interested in this church that apparently Benavides said he got the hulls from, or at least that's what Poe thinks. And in 1977, T.F. Boley mentioned to the HSCA, he mentioned this church. He said he was told by someone on the scene that a man shot the officer and had ran west on 10th Street toward the church. Now, Boley according to the official story, was at the scene at the same time that Benavides was, so it could very well be that Bowley heard this from Benavides. Maybe it wasn't just Poe who heard this. Apparently Bowley heard it too. And Sergeant Gerald Hill said to the Warren Commission that after he got to the scene of the shooting, he walked up the street about half a block to a church. This has to be the same church. That would have been on the northeast corner of 10th Street in the 400 block further west of the shooting. And he goes up there, and two women come out, and they don't find anything. But here we have, after going to the scene, for some reason, which is not explained, Gerald Hill went to this church. And very strangely, I think, Gerald Hill at 1:40 says on the radio on Channel 2 for some reason, and all of the Tippit action was happening on Channel 1, he goes over to Channel 2, and this is about 7 minutes after MacDonald had called in about this church. 7 minutes later, a witness reports that he last was seen in the Abundant Life Temple about the 400 block. We are fixing to go in and shake it down. So at a time that seems a little late to shake down the church, Gerald Hill is on the radio saying he's going to go shake down the church. And this is all the church that Benavides, according to Poe, had found the hulls on. So something's going on with this church. And moving along to Benavides' truck, which CBS so prominently shows us constantly in their interview with Benavides, this yellow pickup truck in the background. The official story, of course, is that Benavides was driving that truck when he came upon the scene, and when the officer was shot, he pulled over and kind of ran into the curb. So the idea is that he is there on the scene of the shooting with his pickup truck. Yet here, he's talking to the Warren Commission about leaving the scene and going over to his mother's house. At the time I walked out, I guess I was scared, so I started across the street alley between the two houses to my mother's house. And I got in the yard, and I said I'd better go back, or just caught myself until I got over there, I guess. So I went back around. Now, I think it's interesting that he's making up a story here, and I think he's making it up for him not being at the scene for a period of time. The official story apparently says that he left to go to his mother's house, and that's why he might not have been on the scene for a period of time. Though I think maybe he was really up at the church. But regarding the truck here, if he decided that he's going to go to his mother's house, why does he leave his truck, run into the sidewalk on the street like that? You would think he'd get in his truck and go to his mother's house. But instead, he's leaving his pickup truck parked on the street like that, run into the sidewalk, as if he doesn't really have a pickup truck on the scene. He's telling his story as if he had walked to the scene, it seems to me. And the only other person who ever mentions his pickup truck is Sam Gwynyard, the Negro porter. And in this very strange excerpt from his Warren Commission testimony, were you there when the truck came up that was driven by Benavides? Yes, sir. He came up right after this? Yes, he came up from the east side, going west. Well, the story from Benavides is that he was driving his truck from the east going west, but the trouble is that Sam Gwynyard wasn't there yet. Sam Gwynyard is talking here about what happened after the officer was taken into the ambulance. So Gwynyard is saying that Benavides drove up in his truck after the shooting was all over. If that's true, then it means that Benavides wasn't at the scene when the shooting happened. But I get the feeling from everything Gwynyard says that he has simply been told the story, the whole story, the narrative, even the parts that he wasn't there to witness, and he's just giving that story out here, and probably the reason is because he didn't witness anything at all. I think a lot of these witnesses were lying. And another problem here is the police radio episode. As he told the Warren Commission, Benavides said he got on the police radio to report the shooting here, and he also tells this story to CBS News.
I give him enough time to get around the house, thinking he might have went in the house. I sat there for maybe a second or two, and then jumped out of the truck and run over. As I walked by, I didn't even slow down. I see the officer dead, so I just walked in, got in the car, and I figured that would be the fastest way. In fact, I don't even know why I called him on the radio. I just figured now that it was the fastest way to get a police officer out.
Hello, police operator. Go ahead. Go ahead. It says news. Hello, we've heard a shooting out here. Where is it at? It says the news and police radio. 10th Street. What location? Between Marsalis and Buckley. It's a police officer. Somebody shot him. What's it? 10th Street. It's in a police car. Number 10. Hello, police officer. Did you get that? Police officer, 510 East Jefferson. Thank you. 35. The Citizen News and Police Radio will remain off the radio now.
So his story seems perfectly consistent with the police radio recording, but T.F. Boley told a very different story. He said that when he got there, a man was trying to use the radio in the squad car, but stated he didn't know how to operate it. I knew how and took the radio from him. I said, "Hello, operator. A police officer has been shot here." The dispatcher asked for the location. I found out the location and told the dispatcher what it was. So this sounds consistent with the recording too, if you completely ignore Benavides' story. But if you take Benavides' story seriously, and you take this story from Boley seriously, the two are not compatible. This could not be true that Benavides got in the car, attempted to use the radio, and failed, if the story Benavides told was true. Both individual stories match what's on the radio, so one of these stories, at least one of these stories, is a lie. And in more recent times, T.F. Boley was honored with doing the radio thing, while Domingo Benavides has been completely forgotten. So given all this, I think it's likely that Benavides was actually the fleeing suspect, or one of the fleeing suspects. Aquila Clemens told Mark Lane that there were two of them, and she said they weren't by the body in the street where the policeman was shot, allegedly. She saw them somewhere else. It's not clear exactly where else she saw them, but they were on opposite sides of the street when she saw them. And she said they weren't together. They went this way from each other. The one that done the shooting went this way. Other went straight down past street, that way. Now, I think past street, and that is what she says, but I think she means Patton Street. She has a lazy kind of way of talking. So I think she's saying one went straight down Patton Street and the other went another way. And I think the way she motions with her arms means they didn't go 180 degrees from each other. They went off 90 degrees from each other. That is, one went straight down Patton Street and the other one went at a 90-degree angle from that.
And then did they go in opposite directions?
Yes, they were. They weren't together. They went this way from each other. The one done the shooting went this way. The other went straight down past street, that way.
So if these two people are across the street from each other and nobody else sees them, that probably means they're down Patton Street near the alleys that go both, or the alley that goes both ways, and that one of them, whom I'm calling Hill here because I think that's Gerald Hill, he goes south on Patton, and the other one, whom I think is Benavides, goes west in the alley, and there are reports of somebody going west in the alley, and if you take a right at the next street, that's Crawford, and that'll bring you right up to the church. So I think Benavides and Gerald Hill were involved with this charade on 10th Street, and that's what explains the Benavides problems here. So I think Domingo Benavides was playing the role of Oswald in the charade on 10th Street.